Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Show Me Your Sauces. I'm Snappy, and I'm joined by my dear friend and co host, Dion. How's it going, Dion?
Life is still beautiful.
Life is beautiful. So, this is a new show, a new concept. This was your idea, Dion. Talk us through this. What are we doing today? What are you bringing us?
Well, often, so many times, people push back on us and say, "Show me your sources." Well, we're going to show you sources. I leave that up to you, my friend. But what I can show is sauces. It's some good old fashioned cooking, and we'll get us some history of some cooking and weird history, humor. Well, let's have some fun.
Right? So, you're going to be cooking for us some noodle dishes today. What dish are you going to be making for us?
All right. So, Fideo.
Fideo?
Fideo,
What's
Fideo,
Fideo?
Fideo. Yeah. And spaghetti alla Assassina is in modern times a take on that, which is a toasting of a pasta before it's hydrated in a broth. Because normally with pasta, you just throw it into your pot and boil. But in this version, the pasta is fried, toasted, rendered through fire. So it's gone through fire before it goes through water. And there is, let's say, alchemical tradition behind this, ancient history, and a lot of weird etymology that we're going to be looking into. And part of the kitchen and why we're in the kitchen is people are into occult and witchcraft and shamanism, what have you. It begins in the kitchen.
100%.
Begins with your cauldron, which today is just the pot of water. Um, I got my stainless steel right here, all oiled
Beautiful.
up. Um, yeah, and it deals with the heat, the fire. That's where it would start for a tribe. For the heart of the tribe would be the central fire, the hearth.
Well, this is where we start with everything, right? What's the first and the last and the center of all ritual in the Greco-Roman tradition? Why, it's Hestia, right? Who is the goddess of the fire and the hearth. So we're going to start by breaking down. Oh, let me just change this up. Hestia here. So this is the first part of our presentation. So Hestia, as we know, is the sacred fire. And oftentimes she's depicted as the Vesta Virgin, but traditionally she was seen as aniconic and is the most widely worshipped of all the goddesses within the Greco Roman tradition, right? In the earliest roots of the tradition, we have her being established as the central fire of the city states, where she forms the Prytaneum, the center of all of Greek legal life, where they would do their politics, the center for all democracy. It was also where you would bake communal bread and where you would deposit and burn of the bodies. So often you would take the bones and they would be established around these prytaneum. And when the Greeks would be traveling around, and even the earlier Pelasgians, when they would establish new colonies, they would take from that original source fire, that original Hestia Prytaneum, and they would light a new fire for these new cities. And then from that central fire, everyone would light the fire in their home. And each person would have a hearth, a fire in their house, which they would tend to, and they would do their worshiping there. And this would usually consist also of the ancestral lares in the Roman tradition or the daimones in the Greek tradition. And you would give the first part of your ritual offering to Hestia to the fire, and your last part of the ritual offering. And anything that was discarded on the ground would be left for the Lares or the Agathos daimon, right? The good spirit, the snake spirit. So let's continue here. So I have some really good quotes for you to help unpack this Hestia image, which is so essential to the Greek tradition and the Roman tradition. So this is from the Hymn to Aphrodite, and these are lines 21 to 32. Nor yet does the pure maiden Hestia love Aphrodite's works. She was the firstborn child of wily Cronos and youngest too. by will of Zeus, who holds the aegis, a queenly maid whom both Poseidon and Apollo sought to wed. But she was wholly unwilling, nay, stubbornly refused. And touching the head of Father Zeus, who holds the aegis, she, that fair goddess, sware a great oath, which has in truth been fulfilled, that she would be a maiden all her days. So Zeus, the father, gave her a high honor instead of marriage, and she has her place in the midst of the house, and has the richest portion. In all the temples of the gods she has a share of honor, and among all mortal men she is chief of the goddesses. Right? So she's the first of the goddesses, and she has a special relationship with Zeus and remains a virgin, right? And this is not just unwed as we understand it, right? Those of us studying the Greek, we recognize that this is eternal blossoming as well, the eternal youthfulness of spring. So here we have a recreated shrine to the Lares and to the hearth from Pompeii. And so you can see the snakes, which would be the agathos daimons. Usually one is masculine and one is feminine. Then you have the twin Lares, which you have one of them is missing on the left, but you see the other guy on the right. And usually they'd be carrying twin staffs. And then in the center, you have the priest who's administering the hearth, right? So this is really interesting. So you have the shrine to the Lares in the center, and then you have the cooking oven off to the right there. And these would be in almost every single person's home. Okay. So we're going to break down a little bit more what's going on with Hestia since she's so important and incredible. And in order to do that and to understand her role within the Neoplatonic and Platonic traditions, I wanted to go to Proclus. Proclus is one of my favorite philosophers. He's one of the latest of the Neoplatonic writers, and he's a student of the Iamblican tradition. So really, really interesting character. And this comes from the Platonic theology as translated by Thomas Taylor. But what we're seeing here is he's discussing the idea of essence, of reality, of being, and relating it all back to the goddess Hestia. For essence, ousia, itself is the summit of all beings, and is, as it were, the monad of the whole of things. In all things, therefore, essence is the first. And in each thing, that which is essential is the most ancient, as deriving its substance from the Hestia of beings. So Hestia is equated here with being and essence itself. She is the spark and the flame in the center of our hearts, of our hearth, part of each of us, right? And it's this essential element. She becomes this monad that is parallel to Zeus. So we're going to unpack this a little more here. Into two monads, one decad. So this gives us the classical 12 system that we see in Neoplatonism. Okay, suspending all mundane natures from the two monads. One of these monads is indeed, he is called Jovian, but she dominates the other, Vesta. So we have these two poles, right? One pole is Jove, Zeus, and the other pole is Vesta. And we're going to unpack this a little bit more. It says, and the supermundane Hestia is to the great leader of the 12 gods. So in mundane natures is the earth to the heavens. So this is really important. Proclus tells us directly, right, that she is akin to Demeter and that Zeus is akin to the heavens and that they form this pole directly. So we're going to go into some really deep Stoic philosophy here, which unpacks this even more. This is a really important text. It's called The Greek Theology by Cornutus. Excuse me, sorry about that. And this really gives us a thorough understanding of who Hestia is. So let's read this. It says, next, my child, we must speak about Demeter and Hestia. Both seem to be none other than earth. The ancients called this Hestia because it stands firm, through everything, or because it was placed innermost by nature, or because the whole cosmos stands firm on it as a foundation, since it gives birth to everything and nourishes it like a mother. The ancients called it De Meter, as if it were Earth Mother, or else Mother Dio, because the earth and the things on it ungrudgingly produce what men can divide among themselves and feast on, or because on it they meet with, find what they seek. Hestia is traditionally a virgin because what is unmoving generates nothing. Because of this, she is also served by virgins. But Demeter is not also a virgin. She gave birth to Kori, as it were, Satiety. She, Demeter, being the material for one's being, nourished to satiety. The eternal fire is associated with Hestia because it too seems to be being, and because perhaps all the fires in the cosmos are nourished from the earth and subsist because of it, or because the earth is life giving and the mother of living things, in which the fiery element is the cause of life. She is formed circular and set in the middle of the home because the compression of earth gives it similar shape and setting. This is why the earth is also imitatively called Chthon. But perhaps it was called Chthon from the fact that it contains or has room for everything. As in the line, this road will contain us both. Mythology tells us that she is first and last because the things that were born from the earth and sustained by it are dissolved into it. And his is also why the Greeks start and end their sacrifices with her. She is garlanded with white branches and is crowned and covered all over by the whitest element. What do you think so far, Dion, of Hestia?
I love it. I love it. It shows the role of the fire. You
Right?
know, the relationship to what sustains us.
It's so great that you said that you highlighted the fire because that lines up perfectly with this next quote. And this comes from the biography of Numa from Plutarch, one of the most important texts in the Roman tradition. For Numa, as we know, the second Roman emperor, is the founding father of Roman religion and the codifier and the creator of the cult of Vesta. He built the Vesta temple, and his daughters made up the first Vestal virgins. So let's read here what Plutarch tells us. Furthermore, it is said that Numa built the temple of Vesta, where the perpetual fire was kept, of a circular form, not in imitation of the shape of the earth, believing Vesta to be the earth, but of the entire universe, at the center of which the Pythagoreans place the element of fire and call it Vesta and unit. And they hold that the earth is neither motionless nor situated in the center of surrounding space, but that it revolves in a circle about the central fire, not being one of the most important, nor even one of the primary elements of the universe. This is the conception, we are told, which Plato also in his old age had of the earth. Namely, it is established in a secondary space, and that the central sovereign space is reserved for some other and nobler body. What is Plutarch telling us here? That she is the perpetual center in every iteration. She is all centers. So that which is above to that which is below on every plane of existence throughout all universes, she is the center. She is the center in you. She is the center in our universe. She is the center outside of the universe. Everything that exists, all being and form, is contained within Hestia, within Vesta. And she is that center. Wild stuff, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so we're now going to start to get into the cauldron. So, this is a really famous woodcut painting, and this shows Medea and the draining of the blood of Aeson and the replacing of Aeson's blood with the magic elixir that makes him young, that rejuvenates his health. So this is a really important mythological image, and it so shows the centrality of the cauldron, the pot, as this potion creating device. So let's go into it here. Oh wait, before I do, actually, do you have anything to say, Dion, about Hestia and the central fire?
No, no. I'm looking at the fire and the cauldron. Those two concepts together, what magic uh, can be created.
Right? Wild stuff, eh? So we're gonna get here into Medea in her magic cauldron. So this comes to us from Ovid's Metamorphosis. All those fields she visited with ceaseless diligence in quest of charms, 9 days and 9 nights, sought strong herbs, and the swift dragons with their active wings failed not to guide the chariot where she willed, until they reached her home. The dragons then had not been even touched by anything except the odor of surrounding herbs, and yet they slowed their skins, the growth of years. She would not cross the threshold of her home nor pass its gates, but standing in the field alone beneath the canopy of heaven, she shunned all contact with her husband, while she built up from the ever living turf 2 altars, one of which upon the right to Hecate was given, but the one upon the left was sacred to you, O Hebe, goddess of eternal youth. Festooning woodland boughs and sweet vervain adorned these altars, near by which she dug as many trenches. Then, when all was done, she slaughtered a black ram and sprinkled with blood the thirsty trenches, after which she poured from rich Cartesian goblets generous wine and warm milk, grateful to the propitious gods, the deities of earth, on whom she called, entreating as she did so Pluto, lord of ghostly shades, and ravished Proserpine, that they should not, in undue haste, deprive her patient's aged limbs of life. So here we see her beginning. She went and gathered her herbs with her dragons, who were even affected by the herbs. The dragons themselves became young just by being around the herbs. And then we see her digging a trench and offering a blood sacrifice to Hecate and to Hebe, and calling upon Demeter, Proserpine, and Pluto. All right, so we continue. When certain she compelled the gods' regard, assured her incantations and long prayers were both approved and heard, she bade her people bring out the body of her father-in-law, old Aeson's worn-out body. And when she had buried him in a deep slumber by her spells, as if he were a dead man, she then stretched him out upon a bed of herbs. She ordered Jason and his servants thence, and warned them not to spy upon her rites with eyes profane. As soon as they retired, Medea, with dishevelled hair and wild abandon, as a bacchanalian, paced ×3 around the blazing altars, while she dipped her torches, splintered at the top, into the trenches, dark with blood, and lit the dipped ends in the sacred altar flames. ×3 she purified the ancient man with flames, thrice with water and 3 times with sulphur, as the boiling mixture seethed and bubbled in the brazen cauldron near. And into this acerbic juices, roots and flowers and seeds from vales Haemonian, and mixed elixirs, into which she cast stones of strange virtue from the Orient, and sifted sands of ebbing ocean tide, white hoarfrost, gathered when the moon was full, the nauseating flesh and luckless wings of the uncanny screech owl, and the entrails from a mysterious animal that changed from wolf to man, from man to wolf again, the scaling sloughing of a water snake, the medic liver of a long-lived stag, and the hard beak and head of an old crow, which was alive 9 centuries before. These and 1,000 nameless things the foreign sorceress prepared and mixed and blended all together with a branch of peaceful olive, old and dry with years. And while she stirred the withered olive branch in the hot mixture, it began to change from brown to green, and presently put forth new leaves, and soon was heavy with a wealth of luscious olives. As the ever-rising fire threw bubbling froth beyond the cauldron's rim, the ground was covered with fresh verdure, flowers, and luxuriant grasses, and green plants. She's mixing her magic potion, and it's causing even the olive tree to blossom. Medea, when she saw this wonder, took her unsheathed knife and cut the old man's throat. Then, letting out his old blood out of him, she filled his ancient veins with rich elixir. As he received it through his lips or wound, his beard and hair, no longer white with age, turned quickly to their natural vigor, dark and lustrous, and his wasted form renewed appeared in all the vigor of bright youth, no longer lean and sallow, for new blood cursed his well-filled veins. Astonished, when released from his deep sleep and strong in youth, his memory assured him such he was years, 4 times 10 that day. So that she slit his wrists, drained him of blood, then returned his blood as elixir into his mouth and into his veins. And this revived him, returned him back to his youth. All right. So now we're going to get into the next magical Medea cauldron story. But what did you think of that one, Dion? Anything to comment?
Pretty wild.
Pretty wild, eh? So this is the transformation of the ram. So upon seeing the transformation of Aeson, the daughters of Pelias were wondering if they could do this to their father, the king, but they're still not 100% sure. So Medea offers to show them her magic again. So let's see. All right. So again from Ovid's Metamorphosis. When she had at length declared she would restore his youth, she said to them, that you may have strong confidence, this my personal boon, the oldest leader of your flock of sheep, shall be changed to a lamb again by my prized drugs. So she offers to change the ram into a lamb to prove her magic. Straightway a woolly ram, worn out with lengths of untold years, was brought, his great horns curved around his hollow temples. After she had cut his scrawny throat with her sharp knife, Thessalian, barely staining it with his thin blood, Medea plunged his carcass in a bronze-made kettle, throwing in it at the same time juices of great potency. These made his body shrink and burnt away his 2 horns, and with his horns his ears. And now thin bleating was heard from within the pot, and even while they wondered at the sound, a lamb jumped out, frisking, ran away to find some udder with its needed milk. So she killed him and brought him back to life as a lamb. Wild, wild stuff. There's of course more to that story with Medea, but these are the magic cauldron episodes that I wanted to focus on. So for our last magical cauldron episode, and the most important magical cauldron episode, which will tie it in at the end, we of course have Dionysus as Zagreus. But Dion, what did you think of Medea and her magic?
It takes part in the kitchen.
Yeah,
That's what all that was to illustrate. Was in ancient history and philosophy was the role of the and the relationship of the gods to the kitchen.
absolutely, right? Everything is about cooking. All of her magic is in the brew, right? It's in that feminine power. So now we're going to get here into Zagreus Dionysus, right? One of Dionysus's incarnations, and the one who is interesting because after Dionysus, in the classical myth, after Dionysus is born from Demeter, he is then placed upon the throne by Zeus. But while he is upon the throne, he's distracted by the Titans who offer him gifts, a mirror, a spinning top. And he falls prey to these items and falls off his throne. And then the Titans dismember him, they rip him apart. And this is such a huge, important magical image. And we really have to unpack it. So let's dive in here. Okay. So this is coming to us from a Christian source, but it is an important source nonetheless, because Clement of Alexandria, he's writing a book, The Exhortation to the Greeks, where he's trying to refute Greek magic and he's trying to refute paganism and show the superiority of Christianity. So we have to take that bias into account, but he does show us some really interesting stuff. So let's read what he has to say here. He says, but the Titans, they tore him to pieces, placed a cauldron upon a tripod, and casting the limbs of Dionysus into it, first boiled them down. Then, piercing them with spits, they held them over Hephaestus, the fire. So look at this. Not only do they rip him apart, but they boil him down into a potion with the power of the fire, right? Wild, wild stuff here. Let's continue. So now we're going to look into a really interesting text. This is the Scholion of Lycophron, right? And so Lycophron, as we know, this is all about the Alexandria, one of the most important wild texts of ancient Greek and Roman literature, famous for all of its hapax words, like an insane number, but a really, really interesting text that tells the story of Alexandria, which is, of course, Cassandra, but empowered by the spirit of Hera to rebuke men, to rebuke the Greeks, and to deny them Kleos. Really, really important poem that everyone should check out. But for our purposes, we're going to look at the Scholion tradition. The Scholion, of course, these are the writings about the performances of these plays and poems, how you're meant to understand them and perform them for the theatrical tradition. So this is really important literature that really informs these traditions and how we're meant to understand them. So when we go to the Scholion of Lycophron, we find some really interesting stuff. It says, the Titans placed the dismembered limbs in a bronze cauldron and presented them to Apollo, who then set them beside his tripod. Okay? This is really ridiculously wild, guys. Okay. Apollo is the Lord of Delphi. He is the god of the muses and of divination, of prophecy. He rules over the Dracaena, right? And what do we see here? What is he doing? He's taking that cauldron, the dismembered limbs, and making that potion of Dionysus, and he's putting it into the tripod. Let's look at the tripod for a second. What do we see here in the tripod? We see a bowl, a plate, okay, and then we see the oracle sitting upon it. That bowl is called a lesbes, and or a lebes, Lebes, right? And it is a type of magical cauldron. And what we're seeing in the mythology is that this is the cauldron that Dionysus is boiled into, right? The oracular priestess sits upon the corpse of Dionysus in order to divine from, in order to brew her potion with. How wild is that? So that's what I got to say about the importance of the cauldron within the Greek tradition. What do you think,
The
Dion?
boiling off of immortality.
Right? Oh
And
yeah, of
you
course.
even see it in the
The hymn of
Apocrypha
Demeter
with
too.
Shadrach. Remember with Daniel, the story of Daniel, they put them in pots.
Right, I forgot there's the pots there, right, where they boil off the immortality. And of course, there isn't a pot in the hymn to Demeter, but they boil off the child, or Demeter tries to boil off Iambe's child's immortality, right? So Iambe famously welcomes Demeter into her home and offers her sustenance after she's wailing, makes her laugh. And as a reward, she offers to burn, well, she doesn't tell her this because she knows she'll reject it, but as a reward, she decides she's going to burn off the immortality of her child. And so it's secret in the middle of the night, she takes the child and puts them in the fire, right? And is cooking off their mortality. But eventually they catch her doing this and they ruin the rite. So the child never becomes immortal.
Yeah.
And they think that she's trying to kill them, right? There's all these interesting things. There's also, of course, the story with Achilles and his mother, right? Where Achilles is going to be given immortality by being dipped into magic waters, right? Bathed in the magic waters. But
But
she's stopped at the last moment by her husband and doesn't get his heel, right? Leaving him one weak spot.
mm, mm,
No, but there is power in being cooked. being transformed. And we've talked about this before. It makes me think of all the stuff with the coffins, dying and being reborn and protecting the body and going through that transformation, these little deaths, right?
Hmm. Well, I think I got everything ready here to start up some dishes.
So let's
Um,
get into your presentation then.
and I'll start cooking at the same time, mind you. Um,
Awesome.
and eating as part of it. So, I started off, I made right here. You can see it's in this giant mortar and pestle I have. Parmesan Reggiano, olive oil, garlic, sea salt, olive oil, and almonds and lemon zest. I made a type of a pesto here. Um,
Oh, beautiful.
Put it on some toasted baguettes just to get started to snack out. Before we get into a pasta, type of a pasta, Fideo, spaghetti alla assassina, means the assassin spaghetti. And the reason I say Fideo is because I used to eat that as a kid. A lot of kids, that was very normal to us. We get them from school, after school, and the Nona Artia would make Fideo. And this is in Spanish culture, Mexican culture. Um, this is growing up, like I said, and you could make it as a little kid. And the unique part about it was you would take the pasta and fry it in oil before you cook it in tomato broth. And this is the backbone of spaghetti assassina. Now, the story with Assassina, the assassin spaghetti, we originally thought when we did the episode that it was going to have some wild history to it. But it turns out it was a chef around the 1970s, late 60s, early 70s, who was making some pasta for his friends and burned it in the pot there, let it burn and put a lot of pepper at that. And when he served it to his friends, he said, "What are you trying to kill us? Are you an assassin?" And they liked it. But and so people thought it was invented then, that notion of burning pasta and then um, emulsifying it or cooking it, hydrating it in a tomato broth. But that goes way older, centuries older, to fideo, and that was a Spanish term for noodles. And this is the Arab Andalusian word, and it deals with the noodles, how the history of noodles from Italy to Spain to the Middle East to Greece to China, all the different history behind it. Because some people claim, did it come here first? Did it go there first? Greece and China. China, people say Marco Polo brought it, but there's a lot of weird etymologies surrounding pasta and these dishes right here, including fideo. So let's hit the next slide. Let's start. I got some slides before we cook, and so I began my first cooking right here, which is uh, I got a pot, 4 cups of water with the concentrata de pomodoro, which is tomato paste, into the water. Next, I'm going to put a passata, um, which is a tomato puree, you would say, that I sieved. And I took tomatoes, which were San Marzano, and removed the seeds and the skins and put it through a sieve to create this broth, this puree that I'll next mix with the concentrato to make a brodo, a broth, de pomodoro. And I'm just going to get that started in the back and set it on low while I get into some history. And the reason I brought up this picture here is because this is Fidelio, not Fideo. Because somebody was reaching out to me and they're like, "Yeah, I know about that Fidelio." It's like, no, it's Fideo. But Fidelio, just so you're not confused, is that movie. Remember Eyes Wide Shut?
Right.
And he sneaks in and they're like, "What is the password?" Go to the next image and you can see that little thing right there. I put it. It's a clip for the movie Fidelio. But Fidelio is really a Beethoven work. Go to the next image and you could see it. And that's one of the paintings, and what it was is Fidelio means trustworthy, loyal, because this woman husband is arrested and she goes undercover as a man to rescue him and changes her name to Fidelio, trustworthy, loyal. I'm coming
Oh,
for you, honey. I
wow.
love you. Go to the next image just so you can see there it is, Fidelio Beethoven. Now, Fideo is different. Fideo. And that's a type of a toasted pasta. Um, the history started in Arab Andalusia, Spain. Now go to the next image. That's it right there. And they're like little snakes, you would say. Sorry, I'm a little sweaty here in the kitchen. I got a lot of heat going. Something in the oven as well because I was making baguettes.
Beautiful.
Toasted pasta. Now, the toasting of the pasta, there's more to the story. Sure, it makes it taste better. But is there a reason to do this? Is there a reason to render it? Dealing with ergot and oils, hot oils, dealing with beer making. Because you got to understand ergotism in wheat, any bread product, beer product, pasta product, up to hundreds of years ago, they had to invent all these laws, beer purity laws, pasta laws, bread making laws, to keep the ergot out, ergotism. And there's ways of removing it, hot oil, people say, through heat. So it could be a safety mechanism at that, is what I'm positing. And there's other histories we'll get into, the name behind it. Because Fideo means noodles, but go to the next image. I'll show you right there, Fideo, from the word fidos, Arabic fidos, meaning that which overflows. Um, like a noodle has a line, like a snake, it curves, it moves, like a river. And we'll see that if we go to the next slide, please. Fides, yes. Meaning little snakes are threads. That's from, this is a Greek term right here.
Oh,
You know,
interesting.
um, and there's more to it if you go to the next slide. Fidusa, Panagia fidusa. It's our mother of snakes.
Oh, wow.
And the little snakes are the fides. I'm not saying that's Fideo because they get the word they're saying from Arab Andalusian sources, and I'll show you the other etymologies of that before we get started. But
It's
now,
interesting, though.
now
Parallels.
there is a
Wow.
ritual. There is a ritual. Okay, and later hopefully you'll talk about the Etruscan bread, the Greek bread, and those connections.
I will a bit.
And lasagna and different noodles, not just coming from China, but the ancient Greek versions and how it ties to rituals, Eleusinian rituals to ancient Italy, to the foods we eat, to stregoria, to a lot of different things, mystery rites. But all right, so the Panagia Fidusa is a festival of Our Lady of the Snakes, which is on the island of where Marco Polo is. And that's what's funny because I'm not talking about Marco Polo, the Italian explorer that brought the pasta, but Marco Polo on Kefalona Island,
Oh,
um,
wow.
or Kefalonia. It's a Greek island. If I'm saying, I mess it up, but they have this ritual where they worship. I'll go to the next image. I think I got a picture from the ritual. Yeah, from the cathedral there. And it's Our Lady of Snakes, Panagia
Oh,
Fidusa,
interesting.
and the little snakes. And because they have these little snakes on the island that have crosses on their backs, and they let them crawl everywhere and onto the altars and food. And food is part of it. The wheat rituals. Remember, this deals with Eleusinian stuff too, and Demeter, these wheat rituals and ancient rituals. All right, so we were looking at Fidwas, Fideo, the little snakes. Go to the next slide, please.
Right. So,
So in Arabic slang, that means a sacrifice or a ransom is the Fidwa. And there's even more, because even like Sharia law means to go towards water, but there's a noodle dish dealing with Sharia, like meaning little hairs, like Razi Sharia, which is the vermicelli. So that's where I was getting with. So go to the next image.
oh, wow.
All right, vermicelli means little worms. These are the fideo, the little worms we're talking about once again. And there's more to these little worms because the way they make the little worms in the Middle East is with rice. It's like pilaf. It's the vermicelli. It's up in there, and they toast the pasta before it's cooked into the rice in the broth. And that's part of toasting the little worms as a ritual. Ancient rituals here. We'll see more of it. Let's go to the next image. And so you know that what is vermicelli? Vermicelli is spaghetti. That's what spaghetti originally was called, was vermicelli, the little worms. Um, Now this is the altar because you got to understand pasta shapes and names is steregoria. It's magic. It's ritual. In modern times, we just take their shapes and names, but in ancient times, they have meanings. You certain pastas for a different thing. You make a different shape for a different outcome. And the herbs, parsley and garlic, all that, those regular herbs that we like that we would put into these sauces right now have magical purposes, like garlic wards off vampires, this and that. And um, so just so you know, and even tomato is a nightshade. Remember those nightshades, mandrake, and all
Right.
that? Yeah, it's in that family. So there's a little more to the story here. Now, this is called the table of Saint Giuseppe from the Santo Giuseppe cult, Saint Joseph's cult, table of Saint Joseph, which is a ritual every year. Part of what maybe that we're going to talk about a little later too is the rituals with spaghetti and pasta and magic and snakes in times of years, coordinating to the equinoxes, solstices, and harvest rituals at that. And then St. Joseph, and this is the heart of the call, is in Giro de Janano. And that's where women, they prepare the vermicelli, the little snakes, by making the cross of the symbol, and they chant when they're putting it into the water. And um, there's a lot more to certain types of pasta in Italy that are magical, or hexing pasta at that, because we were talking about the Assassina, But so in this picture, I want to show you because there's another thing called pasta malacata, which is the carpenter's pasta. This deals with Saint Joseph because Joseph was the carpenter now. And the carpenter's pasta is toasting breadcrumbs to put on top of the pasta, but it's still the toasting aspect of toasting that bread. Remember, even the Last Supper and that there's connotation. So um, go to the next image. Now that's it right there. Malacata, that says toasted breadcrumbs on top of the pasta. Um, Now, I didn't talk about angel hair. I want to bring that in there real quick, even though I'm not going to show you. I'll just, about you like angel hair pasta, and originally
Absolutely
comes
love it.
from capellini, the little hairs, but it's capelli di angelo. The angel's hair, and it was invented by nuns to feed nursing mothers and young kids because it's easy to digest. And they would be served in a brodo, a broth, like a chicken broth, a protein broth. And the reason I bring up the peaceful part about the pasta, the healing part, because before next go to the next image. Um, so right there, that's the spaghetti alla assassina, which is the assassin spaghetti because it was burnt. But that's really a tradition of Fideo, of burning the snakes. And this is just an upgraded gourmet version created in Bari, late 60s, 70s, by Chef Enzo Villafranchi. Um, and it didn't kill nobody. There's no killing going on in here, but yet there is a pasta that kills people. You go to the next image. There it is. Yes, Strosa Preti, the priest stranglers. And go to the next image one more time. Boom, and there it is. Right now, this is a
What?
modern company that makes this stuff because this is the pasta that was invented back in the day because the priest would come around and steal the resources of the poor farmers. Like, I need your eggs, I need your cattle, your daughters, whatever you got. And cook me a dinner. So they would cook this pasta, hoping that the priest would choke on it. And they would fashion the little snakes. The little snakes were fashioned as little ropes, the hanging ropes that they would hang the criminals at the church. And it had a double connotation of not only the hanging ropes, but the strangling of the priest because it was thick because they didn't have eggs because the priest took the eggs. And there's a lot of anti clerical symbologies in there. So,
That's so important. That's so important to magic in general, especially Greek magic, right? It's all about sympathies. If you were trying to get something to work, you're going to use things that are like certain things, So having your pasta shaped like the murder weapon, like a snake or a rope, makes perfect sense in a magical context.
yeah, yeah. So now I'm going to make some pasta alla cena. Um, the Southland pasta. And as I'm cooking, I'll first I'll tell you some basics, and then you can take over and talk about some more connections with this stuff, with the snakes, and there's a lot more to it. I mean, is this a history
Oh yeah.
show? Or are we cooking? But we're doing both. We're
We're
having
doing
fun.
both. We're having fun, right? We're going to get into it because when we're doing some research, every once in a while we stumble upon things that are just mind-blowing and just so much fun. And one of them is this incredible paper that Dion stumbled upon that I want to show you guys here. And we're going to break it down through a slideshow, but it's called Unspeakable Sacred Things Made of Dough: Vermicelli and pre-Christian serpentine symbolism in southern Italian ritual foods. So, what an awesome title for a paper. But this guy, this is amazing. Busini, he breaks it all down for us and he shows us one of the possible, talking about the roots of any kind of food is is really, 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 really difficult. But what we see here with this though is that we can trace potentially pasta all the way back to the ancient Greek rite of the thesmophoria associated with Demeter and the Kori. So let's get into that here. So let me switch this around. How do I do that? Okay, there we go. All right. So here we're showing this is part of the rite of the thesmophoria, which is the throwing of piglets into a sacred pit, as well as other types of food items which would be carried upon the sacred plate, which is another one of these magical images in the cult of Dionysus. But let's get into it. So this comes to us from the Scholia Lucianum, which is the scholastic tradition that we mentioned earlier, except that this is all around the works of Lucian. And specifically, we're looking at the Scholia around the dialogue of the courtesans, which is one of Lucian's most famous satires. But here he talks about the thesmoph, or here we get a description of the thesmophoria that's in the Scholia. It says, the Thesmophoria, a festival of the Greeks encompassing mysteries, also known as the Scirophoria. It was held according to the more mythological explanation because when Cori, picking flowers, was being carried off by Pluto, one Eubuleus, a swineherd, was at the time grazing his pigs on that spot, and they were swallowed up together in Cori's pit. Wherefore, in honor of Eubuleus, piglets are thrown into the pits of Demeter and Cori. Okay. So Abulius also plays an important role within the Eleusinian mysteries in general. And this idea of the character who dies on the sidelines is really important throughout the Greek magical tradition. Another important character we see is in the Odyssey, right? Where what's his name? Elpenor dies as a consequence for these kind of magical rites that deal with the earth. But this is kind of an ongoing theme. But let's continue here. So the Scholia in Lucian says, on that occasion, too, they bring unnameable holy things fashioned out of wheat dough, images of snakes and male members. So this is really, really, really wild and important. They're basically claiming that they're making a type of pasta that looks like penises and snakes, and they're throwing it in the pits along with piglets at the Thesmophoria as offerings to Demeter and the Kori. All right, so Buccini's going to break this down for us in his paper. He says, though modern scholars sometimes refer to cakes or breads in their translation, the Scholiast Greek says literally, just sacred things prepared from dough of grain or cereal paste. That these unspeakable repercussions of Draconton and Andreon, snakes and men, could hold their symbolic shapes. They may have been baked, but it is no less, perhaps more likely that they were simply dried forms of dough, in effect, pasta. Though in this context, there is no mention of them as human food, right? They're food for the spirits and for the gods. Okay, so Buccini continues. And now we're going to talk about the panspermia, right, which is the seed of the grain and is really important in the offerings to Demeter and all of the Demeter rites, especially the Thesmophoria, but in any of the rites that have to do with the Great Mother, you'll see the panspermia come up, the seed of the grain. So this is what Buccini has to tell us. He says, regarding the panspermia, we note that it appeared in multiple pre-Christian contexts. First, it was offered to the souls of the dead at the holiday of the Anathesteria. Second, it was associated with the celebration of the divine pair of Demeter and the Kori, whose primary role was as bringers of agricultural fertility, particularly regarding grain, and featured in the rituals of the Thesmophoria and other festivals. Third, it also appeared as an offering to the household gods, a manifestation of Zeus, who, depicted as a snake, receives the panspermia. So this is a direct reference to the Agoth daimon, Agoth, sorry, excuse my pronunciation, guys. Let me get a little drink here. The Agathos daimon, and of course the Larrys.
Mm. If you could, before you go to the next, before
Mm.
you read, can you zoom in real quick? I want to show my pan here.
Oh yes, of course.
So, boom, I got a hot iron pan right here. Put some olive oil, some chili flakes from the garden, some crushed garlic. I'm toasting it up. And in a minute, I'm going to put some of this tomato broth. And the broth is made, I told you earlier, of the tomato puree along with the tomato concentrate and water. And so I'm going to get this going, and it's pretty good. And so now that it's right here, I'm going to take some of this and put it right here. Actually, I'll take some of the passata. Check this out. Right into the hot oil, the tomato.
Oh wow, and you let that burn? Is that the idea? Are you going to add the noodles after, or do you add them on top?
I'm going to put the noodles on top. So you see right there, some of the passatas in there.
Wow.
See how it's coming along right there, nice. So then next, I'm going to take some noodles right here, which is your spaghetti. But I'm going to place it on top, just like this, straight on top. And I'm going to spread it out evenly and let it toast. And now this is the process. So I'm going to turn it down a little bit, let it toast, and now go back to the presentation and check in with me in a couple minutes.
Beautiful. Just remind me.
Yeah, right.
That's beautiful. Oh, our dear friend Shay has an interesting allusion, another tradition that's akin, well, Greco-Roman tradition, but a different goddess. We still have recipes for moon cakes for Diana, which are honey and oil and flour and don't taste particularly nice. Interesting that they are moon cakes. Yeah, I've read about those as well, and they were often left at the crossroads at Hecate shrines as well. Really interesting stuff. And then, of course, they have moon cakes in China, you know. But these are cakes where we're talking about dough, but there's still interesting parallels even within the traditions, you know. Really cool. Thanks for sharing, Shay. Really appreciate you. All right, let's continue here. So, as we dive deeper into Buccini, so we're continuing with the panspermia. The term panspermia might be seen then as referring to not only the seeds of grain, but also the seed of men, and the requisite inclusion of pomegranate seeds as an overt reference to the myth of Persephone in the underworld. Okay, so look, the panspermia here, we're getting. Remember, I was talking to you guys about magical sympathy. Magical sympathy is what is important here. These magical correspondences are everything. So this panspermia, right? It's the seed of the grain, but it is also the seed of men. It is also the pomegranate seed. Okay? Where the snake comes in is because we're dealing with the great mother as the flow of time and as the flow itself as the river, and again as the phalloi. The phalloi and the seed of men, we come back to the snake, we come back to the river, we come to the flow. It all interconnects when you start to see these correspondences. So let's continue. It says grain seed, human seed, and the specific pomegranate seed that bound Cory below, all in one word. It matches the Megara ritual where rotted piglet flesh was mixed with seed grain before sowing. Reinforcing this, Buccini notes the dead were sometimes called the people of Demeter. Those who died are the people of Demeter, right? They go to the ground. So this is a really interesting thing. This is a modern version of an ancient Greek treat that is related to the kukion. It has the same root word, and sometimes they even use that word kukion to refer to this type of sweet tasting dough that would be given to children. And we're going to talk about this in the Italian context here from Buccini's paper. He says, mostly rural areas in Campania, Basilicata, in Calabria, both sweet and savory versions are called cuccia. In Sicily, sweet versions under the same name are widespread. This name is Greek in origin, a neuter plural as collective, derived from the Greek kukion, kukia, which means kernel, bean, diminutive of kokos, kernel and seed. So again, we're coming back to the grain again, the grain kernels, the grain seed, the pomegranate seed, the panspermia, right? All of these variations of the seed. And now the bean is also a seed. And it also has this magical connotations. All of these are correspondences, right? So now we're going to look at one of the more interesting uh, dishes from southern Italy. And this is called lasagna iceci.
Oh,
Um,
before you go there, zoom in on mine.
okay,
There you go. I got the pasta that I fried, caramelizing the tomato sauce around the pasta. So normally you boil your pasta, but here you fry it in garlic, olive oil, and tomato puree slowly, and it caramelizes around the pasta and sears it. So it may seem like the opposite way to do it, but it comes out amazing. So yeah, I'm doing this, and then every now and then I'll take some of the broth and put it over it as it starts to stick or gets to starts to burn. We want it to burn a little bit, but not too much. So yeah, go back to the presentation, my friend.
that's beautiful. How interesting. Love it. All right, so now we're looking at lasagna ikeki. I, I'm obviously butchering that, so apologies to every Italian out there. Excuse me. All right, we're going to continue here. So, what basically Busini is arguing is that in southern Italy, we have an evolution of from panspermia to cuccia to lasagna ikeci, right? Says, I suggest that the further specifically southern Italian development of the dish to lasagna ikeci has bundled the seed symbolism with the deceased ancestors in the beans, and that the flat broad noodle perhaps symbolized the shrouds that traditionally covered the dead, rendering the dish fully appropriate for the autumnal and vernal funerary observances. So you still see this dish served at autumn and vernal rites, even in the Christian tradition, and it's still associated with the dead. Really quite interesting. So now we're going to look into some of this more magical snake symbolism with the Lares and the house rites. So this, of course, here we have the Agathos daimons, the male and the female version. The male is the one with the crown on his head. Okay, so what does Bucchini have to tell us? He says, in Europe, alongside the most human like animal, the bear, the snake, the least human like animal, stands out as a symbol of liminality. As conspicuous practitioners of hibernation, technically brumation for snakes, both bury themselves in late autumn and arise again in early spring, crossing a symbolic boundary between the underworld and our world. For this reason, the snake has been thought of as a messenger. In its liminality, it is connected to both Demeter and the Kori, moving between worlds, but then especially to the later with her hibernal disappearance, and is so entwined with the cycle of seasons and wheat cultivation and the cycle of life, death, rebirth. The association with rebirth is reinforced symbolically through the snake's sloughing of its skin, a kind of rebirth, and moreover through its phallic form and natural suggestion of fertility. Okay, so now we're going to get into a southern Italian goddess that is really, really famous and was vilified during the Christian era. We have no statues of her surviving except for this one that I'm aware of. And this is the goddess Angitia, the snake mother from the Orson tradition. Um, and she's often equated with Medea. So let's see here. This is what Busini has to tell us. He says, in our fragmentary record of the Osco-Umbrian languages, One notes, for example, the numerous inscriptions in multiple languages across the region of the mentioning of the goddess of fertility in grain, Angitia, the Oscan, Angitia, who had an important shrine in the territory of Marsi, modern Abruzzo, a people infamous among the Romans for their relationship with snakes. Whether native Italic tradition or a harmonization of Greek and Italic traditions, in Roman iconography of Ceres, the goddess was regularly accompanied by serpents. And we know that Ceres is often equated with the great mother Demeter, right? Wild stuff. So here we're going to see this is a really famous painting. This comes from the frescoes of Pompeii, and this came from a rich nobleman's house. This was his painting to the Lares. This was from his lalarium, his personal shrine over his hearth in his home. And it's the most detailed painting we have of the Lares that survives. So here we can see, of course, the agathos daimons in the bottom, the male and the female, but you can also see the magical sacred twins, right? Which is, of course, related to Romulus and Remus, but this is of a much older tradition, right? The twin Lares that are born to the great mother Tacita that we see, of course, referenced in Ovid's Fausti, right? And then, of course, we have the offering of the piglet, right? And we have the offering of grains. And we have the priest with the horn of plenty, the sign of Ceres. And then we have a priest on the other side blowing a flute. Okay, let's continue. So Buzzini continues. In the case of those gods of place, that is, the Lares, the Agathos daimons, seen in Pompeii's hearth paintings, I suggest that the primary connection was with the non-venomous natrix helveticus, in English the grass snake, but in many Italian dialects, the water snake, the Bischia d'acqua, a name which recognizes this serpent's ties to aquatic environments in which it routinely hunts amphibians and small fish. It also has a particular connection to agriculture, as it often lays eggs in heat generating dung and compost heaps and uses farm structures for shelter. Like other snakes, the natrix favors edge habitats, where farmed fields meet forests, and altogether passing between water, land, field, and forest, nature, and culture. The water snake is a quintessential creature of liminality. Remember, when we're talking about the liminal world in the Greek understanding, we have to see it through their understanding of the worlds. Hecate is the goddess of these three worlds, right? Earth, the underworld, or sorry, it's the underworld, the waters, and the skies, right? Earth, water, skies, the three worlds. All right. So we're going to get into a really interesting thing. There was a discovery of a Latin fragment by this character Vincenzo Ortaleva in 2015, which is really, really important. And it makes a connection between this obscure Greek word and the Latin word for vermicelli. So the fragment includes the phrase "a hydri id est urmacusali," and so basically it says "and hydri that is urmacusali." So this is the first time we get a strict definition of what this hedria is. And so what Bussini tells us then what this is getting at. He says, I concur fully with Ortaleva's rendering of mucusali as a miscopying. Basically, he's saying that it means vermicelli, representing a plural of the diminutive form of the Latin vermis, worm, and corresponding to the Italian form vermicelli. Thus, the text explains that hedria as being the same as the presumably better known boiled vermicelli. Okay? String pasta, therefore, basically what this is arguing is that string pasta existed in southern Italy in as early as the 7th century. So this pushes pasta back 2 centuries before the Arab incursions began and connects it directly to the Greek ritual magic tradition. Okay. So he gets into it and he will explain it a little bit further for you. So we had that hedria word, but it also relates to another Greek word, itria, which is what you were talking about earlier, Dion. You were hoping I'd get to. So
That's for
Cassini
pasta in
states,
Greek. Yeah.
right? The development I propose is that the Old Greek itria, denoting a string like pasta, etymologically opaque to ordinary Greek speakers, was reanalyzed as hydria, pronounced idria, quite possibly as a result of the ritual consumption of this food, in association with the symbolic nexus discussed above, possibly a non elite Greek or Greco-Italic correlate of the serpentine dough forms ritually sacrificed at the Thesmophoria and other related celebrations. So that word idria, that means Greek pasta, comes to us from an older word, hydria, which means little water snakes
Or it means a water vessel.
or a
It means a
water
water
vessel.
pot. It means a water cauldron.
A water cauldron,
Yeah,
right? It
yeah.
has to do with the pot and it has to do with the snakes in the pot. And this takes us right back to the Solomonic magic stuff again, right, Dion? Putting spirits in the pot. What are the snakes but spirits, right?
Mm.
We'll continue. It says, I say an adapted translation because there is a mismatch between Greek water snake and Romance worm. Some plausible but unprovable linguistic explanations suggest themselves, but one motivated by religious considerations, if also unprovable, seems stronger. The switch to worms, perhaps, was in response to the process of Christianization and the complete association of snakes with evil and Satan. So vermicelli becomes the little worms instead of the little snakes because they don't want it to be satanic. It's an active changing of the word. And this is what he's claiming why we also see a removal of that word hedria, because it was seen as satanic. You couldn't call them that. You had to call them vermicelli.
Mm.
Right? So let's continue. He says that popular pagan rituals were particularly targeted for elimination by the early church is demonstrated by the law intended to suppress the worship of the Lares and the household gods, included in the Theodosian Code of 392 AD. So we just did all this work associating this dough with the snakes and with these household rites. And now we're seeing that the Christians specifically outlawed the household rites, right? As well as all of the rites associated with the cults of Demeter. And so this is from the Codex Theodosianus. It says, no one shall worship the Lar with fire, the genius with wine, or the Penates with fragrance. And those are all various Roman words for different types of spirits of place. Some are associated with the mind, like the genius. Some are associated with the ancestors or with the center of the home, like the penates. And the Lars, more ambiguous term, often associated with the crossroads, right? But they're all different types of these intermediary spirits. Lares, of course, is etymologically related to our modern fairy. These is the same thing, right? Or even in later connotations, fairies, Larrys are the same as brownies. And this is directly spoken of in the literature. So, and we get into, of course, the gnomes and other creatures, right? The gnome is actually a creation of, what's that writer? It's going to bug me now. But it was it's a made up word and it has to do with the mind again, the nomos in ancient Greek, but we're referring to spirits of the earth. But yeah, really cool stuff here. But that's what I got for you guys in terms of my presentation, diving into all this kind of wildness in terms of the language and of pasta being related to the cult of Demeter and the Kori. But I think there's a pretty good possibility, unspeakable, items made of dough that are fashioned in the likeness of snakes and men, tossed into these trenches during the necromantic rites, along with the piglets to feed the ancestors.
Mm, mm.
What do you think, Dion?
I think it's wild. Zoom in on the picture if you could.
Yeah.
And what I've done, I've been cooking the first. We fried the pasta in the tomato broth, and you keep adding broth to it. And now I'm going to add some olive oil at the end and give it a nice little sear, and it should be done. And then I'll plate it up. And I got a friend here from Ecuador. Is that where you're
Oh,
from?
man.
It's from LA.
From LA, right? American through. Right. Oh, that's
Yep.
awesome. That looks so good, man. So now
Yeah,
you're going to give
spaghetti
this.
Assassina, the assassin's pasta, which is frying the pasta in garlic, olive oil, and pepper with a little tomato passata and brodo. And then you're caramelizing the tomato onto the surface. And then I'm finishing off with a nice olive oil, then I'll plate it up.
Beautiful. That's amazing, Dion. So anything else you want to say about all of this kind of wild Demeter stuff? And what do you think about the relationship to noodles and snakes and the dead and phalluses?
Pretty wild. Um, with that, I hope you all enjoyed and like, subscribe, share, and join us. We'll be cooking next week. More weird dishes, more weird history, having fun, and we'll leave the ingredients below. And yeah, we'll all partake together in some good food.
Amazing stuff, everyone. So thank you guys for tuning in. This is
You
our
know,
first episode, so we're still kind of working things out. I will be adding the recipe from Dion once he sends it to me, and I'll put it in the description. But thank you guys for tuning in. Yeah, we're going to be doing many, many more episodes. The connection between food and magic is just, they're the same thing. So we have an infinite number of episodes to go into, right? For those of you who watched our other show, The Occult Explorers, you know that we've talked about food quite a bit. We did the whole Epicurean Guide to Satan, or Lucifer, where we got into things like the satire plates and the fool. And of course, we've talked about the coffin, which was a type of ritual cake where you would put food in, and that predates the coffin that people are buried in, right? So
are
the
the
coffin,
fool? The fool is a dish. A lot of these
right?
famous words we go back in time are actually dishes.
Food.
So here, let me show you. You can zoom in, and I'll show you. I plated it up right there. Put some cracked pepper on it, and there you go.
Beautiful. I'm so jealous. Now you're making me hungry. I gotta go make
Well,
something.
you
Maybe I'll
said
make
you're going to
some of
make some
my own.
coffins next time. We'll see what dish. Leave us comments below what part of the world you want us to start next week. But we got a lot of food to cook. Just so you know, there's a
Excellent.
lot of interesting dishes and folklore, and if you like Indian food, chai tea, um, there's so many good dishes out there.
From everywhere. We're interested in it all. If you got a good story or if you got a good dish or both, leave us a comment. We want to hear from you. But we'll be back next week with more good food, good stories, and wild history. So thank you guys for joining us. We're Show Me Your Sauces. Much love and take care.
Ow!